Greetings, veterans and friends. John Otte, your host here at Pennsylvania Veterans Forward, and I'd like to welcome you to episode 8. Our episode today focuses on transitioning veterans out of the Reserve and National Guard components of military service. We speak with Ms. Melissa Singer, a team lead from the Reserve Component Transition Advisor Program, an organization that is designed to help transitioning Reserve and National Guard component personnel either back into civilian life after deployment or a separation from the National Guard or Reserve components after their expiration term of service. It's an episode filled with great information. She talks about the opportunities that her program has to help soldiers with the lifelong transition, not just immediately after deployment or after separation from the National Guard or Reserve components. She talks about a lifelong commitment with her program that they make with the veteran, that those benefits could be used at any time. It's a great episode filled with a ton of information. And without further ado, let's get right to the episode. Good evening, veterans, friends, and guests, and welcome to episode 8 of Pennsylvania Veterans Forward. I'm your host, John Otte, and we've got a really great show for you today. We're here with Melissa Singer from the Reserve Component Transition Assistance Program, which I believe is headquartered in Harrisburg, PA, at the current moment, right, Melissa?
Myself and my colleague, yes, we're based out of Pennsylvania. I work the coverage area out of Anvil, and my colleague covers the western end of Pennsylvania.
Okay, fantastic. And Melissa's going to tell us all about what the Transition Assistance Advisor Program is all about. But first of all, welcome, Melissa, to the show. It's an honor, really, to have you here, and really glad you're here to talk about this important, what I consider one of the more critical topics for transitioning veterans.
Thank you, John. Glad to be here.
It's great. It's great to have you. So we always start out with a little bit of a bio on our guests and what you did, and of course, I know a lot, a little bit about you as we've spent a little bit of time off camera. But tell us and our viewers, or tell our viewers who Melissa is and a little bit about your background, especially your military background, which is fascinating.
Sure. So I enlisted into the Pennsylvania Army National Guard. I initially served in the finance battalion. I then transitioned into personnel. I worked AGR for 23 years of the 28 years of service that I spent total in the Pennsylvania Army National Guard. Absolutely loved what I did, loved being a soldier, loved being an NCO and a leader, and definitely enjoyed being that person that when service members had questions that most often I was the person that they would seek out to get the answers that they needed, which kind of helps me in the job that I do now today.
Sure, absolutely. And did any combat deployments?
So I did deploy to Iraq in 08-09 with the 56th Stryker Brigade out of Philadelphia. I also
so you had that same crappy travel agent I did, right? That just sent you to all the crappy locations.
Yeah. It was a great deployment for me. I met a lot of new people when I worked at the state G1. The 56th Brigade was the battalion that I assisted with all their personnel actions. So I got to know a lot of the full-time staff, which is how I met Rich Cassie, who then, when he retired, he helped me to become a member of his VFW post. So.
Oh, great. And for those of you that don't know Rich Cassie is a member of he's the co-chair of the national legislative team here in Pennsylvania that travels to Washington, D.C. to advocate for veterans' benefits and entitlements and lobbies the U.S. Congress. So that's fantastic. Rich is a frequent guest here on the show as well. That's a fascinating career, and it sounds like rolls right into, as you said, right into what you do now.
It does. It definitely, with my background in the military, it definitely helps me to be able to answer some of the questions that the service members or veterans or even their families may have. I know exactly who to go to get the issues resolved for them. So.
Yeah, and that's half the battle is just knowing resources you have and who you can go to, and pointing, if not help, be able to directly help, but pointing people directly to those that can help. Right.
Oh,
That's
it certainly
that
is.
that's a great segue. Wanted to talk about, so let's talk a little bit about your organization, the Transition Assistance, Reserve Component Transition Assistance Program, and how is that different to what active duty soldiers and sailors, Marines and airmen encounter separating from active duty?
So, the Reserve Component Transition Assistance Advisor Program assists all Reserve Component service members who have 180 days of continuous active duty service. That can include current active duty service members who had prior Reserve Component time. They would also qualify for our assistance. We extend that service out to their families as well. So the program and how it kind of compares to TAP is for the active duty component. Whenever you're coming off of active duty orders, you are required to go through the transition assistance program through TAP.
Got it.
Obviously, there was nothing in place for reserve component service members when whether they came home from a deployment or they left the military service, or anything for them after they separated.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So there was a gap there, right? There was a gap there that transitioning active duty people were getting services and access to resources and things like that. And pretty much maybe even, going far to say that there was a lot of preparation, right?
Yes, there sure was.
For those that were,
Yeah.
and the reserves, even though that they were technically, civilian soldiers, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was a gap there that they needed those services too, and that they may not be getting the same or equivalent access to resources or types of resources or briefings that active duty was getting. How long is the Reserve Component Transition Assistance Program? How long has that been active?
So it's been since 2005, and over the course of many years, the program has changed. Obviously, with the way that the military environment has changed as well. So initially, it was strictly assisting service members when they came home from a deployment, and being here back home for their families while they were overseas. And again, it just developed and progressed over the years to accommodate service members that are not deploying as often anymore. Although we still have service members in Pennsylvania that are constantly throughout the year deploying, so we make sure we are aware of who those service members are, those units that are getting ready to go out the door. We participate in their pre-deployment briefings that they have, whether it's at Fort Town Gap or a unit in their area. I definitely will keep in touch with them, with the leadership, especially while they're overseas, just to let them know that, hey, we're still here. If any of your service members need assistance, and again, for their families. And then when they return home, we make it a point to go to their DMOB site, because a lot of times,
Sure.
it's a big transition when they're overseas. There are some monetary benefits to deploying. So when they come back home, a lot of those benefits will no longer be in effect. So now they have to readjust to, being without that additional income that they were or may have, been earning. So we just want to make sure that
Sure.
if they find themselves in any kind of financial hardship, that we're there to help them with that situation.
Okay, so it's not a one and done. So if
Right.
they're deploying, and I didn't think about it in terms of multiple deployments, right? You do a deployment, you come back, you go back again. You may need that. You may need to cycle in and out of the program, right? Or you may need different levels of assistance depending on where you are, right?
Right. Depending on
In
where you
your
are in your
military
career.
career.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, we have
Got it.
some service members that may not have deployed, but they still have Title 10 active duty service that would qualify for them for assistance. Um, Service members can sign up for active duty orders through tour duty. When that situation happens, they become what is known as an individual mober. So that's one of the initiatives that myself and my colleague Matt Armstrong are working on, is to stay in contact with the staff that manages those kinds of folks that volunteer for deployments or volunteer for active duty service somewhere else within the country. We want to make sure that before they leave home, that all their affairs are in order. Stay in touch with them
Sure.
while they're there, and then make sure that they know that we'll be there to welcome them home.
That's fantastic. That really is, and that's you get. It's almost like you get the active duty benefits without being on active duty, right? Or the active duty assistance, wherever that is. That's fantastic. What are some of the types of cases that you handle for at the Reserve Transition Assistance Program? What are some of the types of cases or services that you handle you know um, with those transitioning service members? And we'll talk a little bit about before, during, and after, right? We'll talk
Okay.
about the benefits, especially after transition, perhaps maybe out of the reserve or National Guard component. But what types of cases do you typically see, or services that you see your members using the most of?
So I would say that our top three trends here in Pennsylvania would be employment, education, and financial assistance.
Okay, great. And let's take those in order. Employment types of assistance, resume writing, interviewing skills, some type of maybe preparing for to seek employment. Give us an idea of the types of activities perhaps in the employment category.
Okay, sure. So we can connect service members with various nonprofit organizations, veteran service organizations that are your subject matter experts that deal with this day in and day out. Um, Depending on the needs of the service member, it could be anywhere, someone who is unemployed and looking for a job. We work with a lot of employers locally who are
Sure.
willing and wanting to hire specifically veterans. So we identify who those folks are. Throughout the month, I receive email notifications from various companies with their openings that they have. I can share that information with the service member or a veteran and their family if they're in need of a job. It could be someone that maybe they just want to change in their career, in their civilian
Yeah.
job. Um, we can utilize different benefits such as education to help them get different types of certifications if they want to, apprenticeship type
Wow.
programs. I can connect
Sure.
them with an organization called National Guard Employment Network. And those are the ones that will assist in taking a service member's military experience and converting it to the civilian workforce terms, basically. Um,
Great.
they'll also,
That's fine.
yeah,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
they'll also go as far as helping you to apply for positions that you would be eligible for, qualified for, as well as help to prepare you for the interview process.
Fantastic. Boy, you can't, those services, especially nowadays um, with not the volatility, but just the volume of people that are transitioning jobs, and, the labor market being what it is, right? More people, more jobs than people available to fill them. That's fantastic.
Yeah, really.
Are there any fees associated with this to the service member?
None at all, John. It's absolutely 100% free. All the services and the resources that we will connect them to do not charge anything to help them get the benefits that they've earned, basically.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's I get a lot of questions around that. It's saying, I have people call me that say I either need a job or I have a veteran that needs a job, right? And I know people in various in various nonprofits as well, and say, but they're looking for, can you connect me to a resource? But it can't be any cost to the veteran, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, we do see that there are services out there that say, oh, we'll take care of the veteran, and then the veterans end up paying an exorbitant
Yes.
amount of money
Yes.
for
See that a
resources
lot.
that it's crazy. And now we even see that in the medical field with all the Camp Lejeune, um, with all the Camp Lejeune advertisement for law firms that want to take a piece of that claim on behalf of the veterans, and which I just think is just reprehensible to prey on veterans like that. But let's go into that second category you mentioned is you see a high trend for use of your educational assistance. And if you could give us an idea of what that looks like.
You know, John, really, a lot of what we do when we do go out and we brief or we participate in community events, we really focus on informing and educating and assisting, the veterans and their service members in accessing their benefits. Um, so when it comes to education, there really is a lot that they don't quite understand. A lot of times when service members are separating, getting ready to leave the military, they think that their dependents are able to use their GI Bill, their post 9/11 GI Bill if they didn't, but that's not the case. There are certain steps that an individual must take in order to ensure that their dependents can use that benefit if the
Sure.
service member
Yeah.
doesn't. There's a lot of additional programs that the VA does offer, educational programs that kind of support the post 9/11 GI Bill. Um, there's the STEM program. If we have an individual who is in any one of those types of degrees, and they've exhausted all of their 9/11 GI Bill, they may be eligible then to qualify for the STEM scholarship, which then would provide additional 9 months of benefits. Not quite like the post 9/11. They wouldn't get the BAH and they wouldn't get the book stipend, but certainly they'll get assistance in helping to cover their tuition.
Well, that's fantastic. There's a lot of folks, and some of those decisions have to be made prior to somebody actually separating from the National Guard, right? Such as leaving it to your dependents and
Yes.
things like that.
Yep.
You have key decisions to make. So if you're going to be transitioning or separating from military service, completely, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, those are important. It's probably key for veterans to know that as they're running through a transition point at any point, whether you're active duty or National Guard or reserve as well.
Hmm.
What do you see as some of the key, Melissa, some of the key pitfalls or the key mistakes that veterans make when they go through either an active duty transition point or a reserve transition point? Even though we're going to talk about kind of almost I don't want to say lifelong, maybe that's not the right word, but a continuous relationship with your organization versus kind of a one and done with the active duty. What are the key things or key elements or key mistakes, maybe missteps that a veteran might make, either in an active duty transition or maybe going through your program as well, that you would want them to know about?
So one of the things that I would recommend to any reserve component service member who is thinking about separating, whether it's an ETS or going through a medical separation or just retiring, that they reach out to their reserve component transition assistance advisor. We are located across the country, to include Guam, Virgin Islands, and DC.
Oh,
So
wow.
there's at least one of us in each of those states and territories. Um, so a lot of times what I see is service members, mistake of my own. I wasn't aware that I was going to have SGLI for 120 days after I separated. I could have
Well,
then,
that'd be good to know, right?
yeah,
Especially if something happened.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, it is free of charge. When they separate, they'll have that 120-day coverage. They can choose to convert it to VGLI plan, or they can convert it to a commercial policy. The same thing for their family coverage if they have that when they separate. That ends immediately, and then they can also convert that to a commercial policy if they wanted to.
Yeah, looking back in my own career, that was a key. That was a key. I could have converted an SGLI policy to VGLI, and I didn't do that. And I know some people that did do that. Of course, when you're that young and you're like, no, that's insurance. That's going to cost me money. Why do I need that, right? And then you realize at some point that that was probably a decision that you could have you wish you had the opportunity to rethink. You mentioned a third category, and I had forgotten already the third category, but it was employment, education, and oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
Financial assistance.
Financial
Yes.
assistance. Okay, financial assistance, and we'll edit that part out earlier. Um, okay, so this is you mentioned a third category called financial assistance. What kind of trends are you seeing there?
So we'll see, obviously, with COVID, that there was a lot of service members that were affected, whether they lost their full-time jobs, hours were cut back, in some cases, both family members, both parents lost their jobs. So they struggled to pay the basic necessities, and that's rent, mortgage, car payment, utilities, or simply just putting food on the table, for their family. So how we come into play is we partner, we work closely with family programs throughout our state, and they're the ones that put on the what they call military shares, and they
Hmm.
provide food to family members who sign up. The family members then come and pick up the food. I do volunteer with the representative here in Lebanon County to distribute that food on the designated day. Um, there's a great.
So if you
Go ahead.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, you were going to ask about something about the food insecurity.
Yeah, yeah, and I was gonna say that if and I was also going to ask about homelessness and things like that, and housing and things like that. So I don't know if that's part of your program as well, but please continue.
Oh, what I was going to mention, financial hardship. Again, the other effects of not having a job. There's a great organization in Pennsylvania that you may have already heard of called the Pennsylvania Wounded Warrior Program.
Absolutely,
I
great program,
I
great,
Yes,
fantastic. They just had a dinner the other night in Harrisburg.
yes, they are absolutely wonderful. When I have service members that come in contact with me that don't qualify for any of the other programs that are available here in the state, they are a resource that I will go to. And every single time, knock on wood, every request that I have submitted to them, they have approved. Um, and to be on the receiving end of that phone call and listening to a grown man cry because he is so thankful that there's this organization out there that was able to help him in a time of need. It's very touching. They do a lot of wonderful things, and I'm sure they probably, because they don't deal with service members directly, they do work through advocates such as myself to submit the requests. Um, so I don't think they get the chance to really hear the words of thanks, from the individuals that they're really helping. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, incredibly wonderful organization, Pennsylvania Wounded Warriors. I'm a big supporter of them. I know that the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the state of Pennsylvania, and other VSOs around Pennsylvania, and even nationally, are sponsors or um, real big advocates of Pennsylvania Wounded Warriors. Not to be confused with the national organization of Wounded
Oh
Warriors.
no.
This is Pennsylvania Wounded Warriors specifically. We talked a little bit about financial assistance, educational, and employment. What about other services like homeless veterans or housing? Is that are those referrals to Pennsylvania Wounded Warriors and other organizations of the like?
So most often, the individual when I do and when I am contacted about an individual who's experiencing homelessness, um, I will work with the regional program outreach coordinators here in the state of Pennsylvania, simply because they are embedded more into the local counties of their coverage
Yep.
area, their regions that they have. Um, and their role is to stay on top of all those local resources, where I'm more at the national and state level. It's not that I don't know about some of the local, I just don't know all of them like they do. So in most cases, if I feel that the individual will best be assisted by referring them to another individual, such as the RPOCs, the Regional Program Outreach Coordinators, or a family support specialist out of the family programs that we have here in the state. That is what I'm going to do, because at the end of the day, what I want to see happen is the individual get the assistance, that they in that situation desperately need.
Yeah. Yeah. Mission. I love it. Everybody, every veteran that I run into, or in civilians that are charged with assisting the military, in this capacity, or serving veterans in some. Everybody is mission focused, and I really love that. Of course, you've had 20 plus years of refinement in those capabilities, right? And that so you've really mastered your craft there. Let's talk about, if any, and this is mostly for my own edification, but obviously for our viewers as well. What, if any, connection does your organization have to the VA? And a lot of the questions, I mean, healthcare is on everybody's mind. The PAC Act, as you know, was just passed with finally, right, with a tremendous amount of support from the VFW and VSOs and some of the other organizations as well. And even some celebrity, right?
Yes.
Even some celebrity work as well. So, what, if any, since healthcare is so critically important, what connection if any, does your organization have to the VA, or if you have veterans that have healthcare issues, especially those that were exposed to particulate matter in Afghanistan and Iraq, and even some in Desert Storm, where I had served initially. What resources do you have, or connections do you have with the VA, or is it more of a referral to either the VA directly or a VSO like the VFW or the American Legion or the Disabled American Veterans to help veterans file claims for compensation?
So when we talk about disability compensation, in order to have a claim filed, they could choose to do it on their own if they wanted to. I strongly don't recommend that. I definitely recommend going through a veteran service officer known as a VSO. They are trained and accredited through the Department of Veterans Affairs. So if I have someone that comes to me about interest in filing a disability claim, there are certain things that I can inform them about. But at the end of the day, after I do talk to them about it, I'm going to refer them to either the county VSO, VSO that works out of the building out at 40 Town Gap that I work out of, or a representative at one of their VFWs, Legions, or DAVs, or AMVETs. So.
Got it. Yeah. And it's so critically important, especially with all of the Camp Lejeune. Again, I'll mention that's on everybody's mind as well, for the Marines, soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines that may have served at Camp Lejeune at one point. And were exposed to the drinking water, which is now, which is was identified as causing specific type of health issues, chronic health issues. Yes. throughout their lifetime. We see a swarm of people swarming to file those disability claims. And to your point, it is important to have an accredited service officer file those claims. I wouldn't recommend trying to navigate the VA system on my own with claims representative. It'd probably be easier to solve the formula for world peace than trying to figure out. And you're dealing with, when you do get the disability compensation, right, the rating, you get something that you're like, how did they arrive at this? And we had on a couple of episodes ago, we had the Lehigh County Director of Veterans and Military Affairs, Tom Applebach, who started to try and explain what he calls the VA map.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's completely complicated, but actually we're going to do another show on that topic as well. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this work. I find it fascinating. We talked a little bit about off camera, but I find it fascinating how you got into this. And what really drives the passion? What drives Melissa to create? What creates this passion in Melissa to be a servant leader to veterans?
Um, I, I think it's just something that's been embedded in me. I am an Army brat. Traveled around the world with my father when I was younger, but and he always said when I was in high school, he would tell me when I graduated, I was going in the military, and I just laugh at him and be like, "No way, Dad, you'll never see me in the military." And
Well, it's a good thing your parents planned that for you, right?
yeah, and here, I was 28 and a half years later, and like I said before, I just absolutely loved I had a great career, made a lot of connections with people, still stay in touch with a good group of friends. We just got together for a reunion, myself and three other of us leaders that have retired, actually worked together to put this unit reunion together, and it was absolutely a fabulous time getting to see all those people that we don't generally get to see anymore. Especially when everyone does separate, they kind of go their own way, unless you have that deep camaraderie, which I felt a lot of us really had. So for our first event, we had about 60 people show up. So I thought that was a pretty good turnout for the first time. But
Yeah.
I just want to help people. I definitely like to share the lessons learned, that from mistakes that I've made along the way, things that I learned about. For example, I just a few months ago learned about a Pennsylvania program, for our disabled veterans, called the Amputee and Paralyzed Veterans Pension. Um,
Oh,
there's
do tell.
So if an individual has 40% disability in two or more limbs, meet some of the other additional criteria, they may be entitled to $150, that is paid to them from the state, tax free. So because I learned about that, didn't know about it previously, it's something that when I do talk to service members and I find out that they already have a disability rating, I make it a point to tell them about that. Do you know about this program?
Sure.
So it's just my mission, really, my personal mission, just to get out there and share the knowledge that I have and want to help people get the answers, get issues resolved. I think even as a mother, your kids come to you with problems and you're the one that they expect to fix it all. So, being an
Sure.
NCO, it was kind of the same thing. You had your younger
Right.
soldiers coming, to the squad mama. That's my nickname at sometimes. Um, so yeah, it's just what I do, what I know and what I love. And when this opportunity came knocking, at a time when I was very concerned about what was going to happen to me after retirement, COVID happened, so fewer and fewer jobs in my career field were being posted. Um, I panicked. And once I finally decide to release that stress and just say what's meant to be will be, I was finishing up my out processing, ran into an individual that used to work in this position before. And she said, "What are you doing, Missy?" And I was like, "I'm leaving, I'm retiring." And she said, "Well, you should come work for me." And I said, "Well, Katie, what do you do?" And so she gave me some literature to take home and look over. And I did some research online. And I just felt like it was the calling, like this was the perfect job for me. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when you serve, especially as an NCO, and you take care of people, and you're charged with caring for their good and their welfare,
yeah,
and many even times the success of their career. You get that, and I know in my own life as well, being an NCO, charged with people's well being. You get that in your blood, and that carries over even in my civilian career as a senior leader in an organization. You get that sense of servant leadership, and which is once you get a taste of that, once you get a bite of that, you don't want to do anything else. And I think that especially anybody who's in the military and been in senior leadership roles, like you have as well, you get a bite of that, and it's just a natural transition. So that's
Yeah.
been that's fantastic. So, as we look to wrap up here, what are the key things that you would want transitioning service members to know? I mean, availability, what you do, anything that you would want any veterans, right? Now, let me ask you this before you answer that, and I'm sorry, but once you let's say a member has already transitioned and is already a veteran, has been out for a year or two or whatever, are your services available to any veteran at their time of the career, or do they have to use it within a certain time frame?
For our services, no. Well,
Yeah.
they can be separated from the military for 20, 30 years, and we could still be there to help them. I was just contacted this morning, as a matter of fact, regarding a Vietnam veteran who had never filed a claim. We tend to hear that a lot from that era of veterans. Um,
Hmm.
a lot of them will say, I'll leave it to the folks that really deserve it, and I try to tell them that you're just as deserving. You served, you experienced an injury or illness or disease during your military service. Um, that's what the program is for. It's not just related to service members who saw combat tours, lost limbs, suffered PTSD, things like that. There's a multitude of illnesses and injuries that a service member may be able to receive disability compensation.
Oh, that's great to know, because we do have a significant number of our veterans of our veteran listeners that in fact are Vietnam veterans, and I too myself have said that in one point and said, instead of using VA healthcare or benefits and things like that, I have commercial insurance. I'm very blessed. Leave it for those that are leave it though for those that are really in need, and to remove yourself from that demographic or that eligibility pool, I think does yourself, if you're doing it yourself and others who have that uh, mindset, a great disservice, because this is something that you have earned, right? This is something that you're holding the government accountable to hold up their end of the bargain, especially if you have serious health concerns or chronic health issues. Um, this is something that the government. This is something, and I really don't like this word, but this is something you're entitled to. You really are, based on, but you've earned it, right? You've earned that entitlement. You've earned that award, or you've earned those benefits based on your character of service. This is great.
And a lot of times they think, just filing a disability claim means the monetary benefit of it. There are other things that come along with filing a disability compensation claim and being or receiving a rating from the VA, and that could be a difference between free health care or paying copays if you do go to the VA for your care.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, absolutely, and those are great points. It's This has been a fantastic interview, Melissa. On behalf of our listeners and veterans, across our listening space, I want to first of all thank you for your service. Thank you for being who you are and what you do for veterans each and every day. It really shows in your character. It shows at the way you handle yourself, and certainly in the way that you continue to serve in the capacity in service to veterans. So, on behalf of all veterans, I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It is wonderful. So, Melissa Singer, ladies and gentlemen, from the Reserve Components Transition Assistance Program. She's an advisor with that program. I will have her contact information at the end, or listed in the description, down in the description, and in the show notes as well. Melissa has also told me that she will provide me with a QR code that if you have a smartphone, you'll be able to scan, and that will take you to an intake form, right, Melissa?
That's correct. Yep. You just fill out the form
Fan,
with the standard name, email, phone number, and you know what benefit they may be wanting assistance with. And when they ask for the TA that they spoke with, just make sure that they drop on the drop down, you select my name. That way it will come to me and I can get in touch with you or with them.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I'm sure that when you get requests, they're handled expeditiously. I get a lot of that and say, I never hear from anybody, but just knowing the way you are, and in the few minutes we've gotten to know each other, it's I can tell you're extremely professional and really good at what you do.
Yeah, every time I receive a phone call about someone who is in need of assistance, regardless of whatever benefit it is, I kind of try to treat it as if it was me making that phone call and wanting someone to help give me the answers of what I need to do to access those benefits. So definitely.
Oh, well, fantastic. Again, thank you for all you do. Melissa Singer, ladies and gentlemen, a advisor with the Reserve Component Transition Assistance Program, a national program. Again, I will have her contact information in the description, as well as a QR code and a slide at the end of the show. Melissa, once again, thank you for all you do. Thank you for your service, and thank you for being who you are. You've been a wonderful guest, and we look forward to having you back on subsequent episodes.
Thank you so much, John.